remember the exact moment when everything changed. Standing in the elevator of my office building, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. The lines around my eyes told stories of laughter and tears, my hair now threaded with silver strands that I had stopped dyeing months ago. My youth had faded quietly, like a photograph left too long in the sun. You might know this feeling too, that creeping realization that your face and body have transformed while you weren't looking. Society bombards us with the message that a woman's value diminishes as her youth fades, that beauty belongs exclusively to the young. The weight of those messages had been crushing me for years, making me feel increasingly invisible as I approached 50. Emma, my 26-year-old colleague, seemed to embody everything I had lost. Smooth skin, boundless energy, the lingering glances of men in meetings. I watched her navigate the world with the confidence that comes from knowing you're seen, admired, desired. Her youth was a currency I could no longer spend, and I mourned what I thought was the end of my relevance. That day in the elevator marked a turning point, though I didn't know it yet. As the doors opened on the lobby floor, a distinguished man in his 50s stepped inside, nodded politely at me, and then something unexpected happened. His eyes returned to mine with unmistakable interest, holding my gaze a beat longer than necessary. It was a small moment, fleeting and possibly meaningless, but it sparked a question. Had I misunderstood what it means to be attractive as a mature woman? The transformation began subtly, with a question from the most unlikely source. During a team meeting the following week, our CEO paused mid-presentation and turned to me instead of Emma. "Sarah, what's your take on this strategy? I'd value your perspective." The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward me, waiting for wisdom I wasn't sure I possessed. You may have experienced similar moments, times when your opinion suddenly carries unexpected weight. There's something powerful about being asked for your thoughts, not because of how you look, but because of what you know. I spoke with a confidence that surprised even me, drawing on decades of experience that no younger colleague could match. Michael, our marketing director, had always been somewhat dismissive of female input, preferring to surround himself with men who mirrored his aggressive approach. He leaned forward as I spoke, his attention focused entirely on my words rather than my appearance. Later, he stopped by my office to continue our discussion, asking questions that revealed genuine respect for my expertise. That evening, I examined my reflection again, but with different eyes. What if the very things I had been lamenting, the years etched on my face, the wisdom earned through struggle, were actually assets rather than liabilities? What if attractiveness wasn't disappearing, but evolving into something more complex and powerful than the simple beauty of youth? I decided to conduct an experiment, tracking the ways people responded to me throughout the week. Monday morning, I chose my outfit carefully, not trying to look younger but embracing my age with a sophisticated blouse and well-tailored pants. I walked into our client meeting with my shoulders back and head high, embodying the confidence of someone who no longer needed external validation. You can probably guess what happened next, because confidence has a magnetic pull that transcends age. 3 times during that meeting, people directed their questions to me over others. The client, a woman in her 60s, complimented not my appearance but my insightful analysis. "You've clearly been around the block," she said with a knowing smile. He was new to our company, a consultant brought in to help with digital transformation, at least 15 years my junior. Yet Robert sought me out after the presentation, asking if we could schedule time to discuss implementation strategies. "There's something about your approach," he said, his eyes meeting mine with unmistakable admiration. "You cut through the noise in a way others don't." That night, I started a journal, documenting each interaction where I felt seen and valued. Not as an object of youthful desire, but as a woman of substance whose presence commanded attention. The list grew longer than I expected, filling page after page with evidence that contradicted everything I'd believed about aging as a woman. The most revealing moment came during lunch with my friend Diana, who at 62 radiated a magnetic energy I'd always envied. "You're different lately," she observed, studying me over her glass of wine. "You've stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world." Her words struck me like lightning, illuminating a truth I hadn't fully grasped. You know those rare friends who reflect your true self back to you? Diana had always been that mirror for me, seeing things I couldn't see myself. She shared how men approached her more now than when she was 30, attracted not to some artificial youth, but to her authenticity, her self-assurance, the comfort she felt in her own skin. Jack and Diana had been married for decades, yet I'd watched him look at her across dinner tables with the same intensity as newlyweds. "He says I'm more beautiful now than when we met," she confided, "because I know who I am." The revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of attraction, that perhaps the most compelling quality isn't perfection but presence. I left that lunch with a growing suspicion that I'd been measuring my worth with the wrong metrics all along. Physical beauty fades, it's designed to, but there's another kind of attractiveness that only strengthens with time. What if the secret wasn't fighting against aging, but leaning into the magnetic power that comes with maturity? If you're enjoying this journey of rediscovery with me, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps share these reflections with others walking similar paths. Now, let's continue exploring how female attractiveness evolves in ways society rarely acknowledges. I began paying attention to how people engaged with me in conversations. During a dinner party at my neighbor's home, I noticed something striking. Guests consistently circled back to continue our discussions, often abandoning other conversations to rejoin mine. My stories, seasoned with decades of experience, seemed to captivate in ways I hadn't expected. You might wonder, as I did, what creates this pull toward certain people regardless of their age. That evening, a man named David, recently divorced and clearly nursing wounds, settled beside me on the sofa and began sharing details of his life he admitted he hadn't told anyone else. "There's something about you that makes it easy to talk," he said, surprise evident in his voice. Melissa had always been the beauty of our friend group, turning heads well into her 40s with her meticulous maintenance of her appearance. Yet at this gathering, I noticed how quickly people drifted from her carefully crafted anecdotes to seek deeper connection elsewhere. Her beauty opened doors, but it couldn't hold attention without substance behind it. Walking home that night, I wondered if this was the secret no one tells young women, that the ability to listen, to hold space for others, to share wisdom without preaching, these qualities become increasingly rare and therefore increasingly attractive. My value wasn't diminishing with age. It was simply shifting from the external to something far more enduring. The evidence continued to accumulate in unexpected places. At the grocery store, the young man behind the deli counter, who couldn't have been more than 25, listened intently to my cooking advice, asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. His parting words, "I wish my mom knew stuff like you do," made me laugh, but also reinforced my growing theory. You've probably witnessed this phenomenon yourself, how knowledge and experience create a different kind of appeal. Later that week at my book club, I found myself surrounded by women of varying ages, all leaning in as I analyzed the novel's central relationship. The respect in their eyes wasn't about my appearance, but about the depth of my insights. Caroline brought her new boyfriend to the group that night, a handsome professor who initially seemed distracted and uninterested in our discussion. I noticed how his attention shifted when I spoke about the historical context of the book, his eyes finding mine across the circle. By evening's end, he had moved to sit closer, engaging me in a separate conversation about literature that continued long after others had left. Driving home, I remembered how desperately I had once chased male attention, curating my appearance down to the smallest detail. Now it seemed to find me without effort, not from all men, certainly, but from those who valued substance over surface, depth over display. Their attraction wasn't despite my age, but because of what my age had given me. I decided to test my theory at work, where I had often made myself smaller, trying not to threaten younger colleagues with my experience. During our quarterly planning meeting, instead of deferring as I usually did, I spoke with authority about market trends I'd seen cycle through multiple times. The room fell silent as I offered context no one else possessed. You can feel when people truly listen, not waiting for their turn to speak, but absorbing your words, considering them. Our CEO nodded thoughtfully as I concluded, then simply said, "This is why we need your perspective, Sarah." The validation wasn't based on fitting into some youthful ideal, but on bringing value that could only come from years of experience. Thomas had recently joined our team, brilliant and ambitious with the arrogance that often accompanies youth. He'd dismissed my suggestions repeatedly in previous meetings, barely concealing his impatience. That day, I watched his expression shift from dismissal to curiosity to respect as I spoke, outlining patterns he hadn't lived long enough to recognize. After the meeting, he approached with questions that revealed a new openness to learning from me. There was something surprisingly attractive about this reversal, not in a romantic sense, but in the satisfaction of being valued for exactly the qualities that come with maturity. My gray hair and laugh lines weren't liabilities, but badges of experience that commanded attention in ways youth simply couldn't. The shift wasn't only happening at work, but in my personal life as well. At a friend's wedding, I found myself approached repeatedly by interesting men, not the awkward advances I'd endured in my 20s, but thoughtful conversations initiated with genuine interest. One particular gentleman, a professor about my age, sought me out 3 separate times during the reception. You might recognize this feeling, the difference between being viewed as an object and being seen as a complete human being. James asked about my career, my thoughts on current events, my favorite books, questions that revealed he was attracted to my mind as much as any physical attribute. His attention felt different, more substantial, more genuine than what I remembered from my younger days. She was stunning, the bride's niece, 27 and glowing with youth and beauty. Throughout the evening, I watched men approach her, only to drift away after brief exchanges, many eventually finding their way to deeper conversations with women my age. It wasn't that she lacked intelligence, but she hadn't yet developed the depth that comes from navigating life's complexities. Driving home, I thought about how strange it was that women are taught to fear aging, when in many ways, it enhances rather than diminishes our appeal. The confidence that comes from surviving heartbreak, the wisdom earned through mistakes, the self-knowledge that allows for authentic connection. These qualities create an attractiveness that photoshopped perfection can never match. I noticed changes in my body language too, subtle shifts that reflected my evolving self-perception. Where I once might have hunched slightly, trying to minimize my presence, I now stood tall. Where I once avoided eye contact with attractive men, I now held their gaze with comfortable assurance. These small changes seemed to alter how the world responded to me. You probably know how contagious confidence can be, how it creates its own gravity. At a gallery opening, I found myself engaged in conversation with the artist, a renowned painter whose work I'd long admired. As we discussed his techniques, I realized he was mirroring my body language, leaning in when I leaned in, smiling when I smiled. Signs of engagement that had nothing to do with youth. Martin had dated exclusively younger women since his divorce 5 years earlier, a fact our mutual friends often discussed with eye rolls behind his back. That evening, however, I caught him watching my conversation from across the room, his interest evident in the way he maneuvered closer throughout the night. Eventually, he joined our circle, directing his comments primarily to me. Later, he asked for my number with a directness that suggested he saw me not as a consolation prize or age-appropriate fallback, but as a first choice. "I'd love to continue our conversation over dinner," he said, maintaining eye contact that communicated genuine attraction. I realized then that confidence creates its own kind of beauty, one that becomes more accessible, not less, as we mature. I began collecting compliments that revealed this shift in how others perceived me. "You have such a calming presence," said my niece during a family crisis, turning to me instead of her mother for guidance. "I always feel better after talking with you," mentioned a colleague after a particularly challenging project meeting. These weren't comments about how I looked, but about the impact of my presence. You might have noticed similar responses in your own life, the way people instinctively trust some individuals more than others. At a neighborhood gathering, a woman I barely knew sought me out to discuss her marital problems, confessing intimate details within minutes of our conversation. "Something about you makes me feel safe," she explained when I expressed surprise at her openness. He was much younger than me, the new literary agent I met at a publishing event, yet he pursued our conversation with unmistakable interest. You remind me of someone who knows secrets about life the rest of us are still figuring out, Ryan said, his admiration evident not just in his words, but in his attentiveness, the way he remembered details from earlier in our conversation. The pattern became impossible to ignore. This wasn't about youth or conventional beauty standards, but about something deeper that only emerges with time and experience. The magnetism of a woman who has weathered storms and emerged not just intact, but illuminated, seems to exercise a power that transcends the superficial metrics of attraction I'd always believed in. Stay with me as we explore the final chapters of this journey. If you're finding these insights valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to receive more content that challenges how we think about beauty, aging, and self-worth. The most profound validation came from watching how other mature women commanded attention without trying. At a conference, I observed Elaine, a keynote speaker in her 60s, captivate an audience of hundreds with her expertise and poise. Men lined up afterward to speak with her, their body language revealing admiration that went beyond professional respect. You've likely witnessed this phenomenon, how certain women seem to grow more rather than less magnetic with age. During dinner with Elaine later, I asked about her experience of aging in a youth-obsessed culture. She laughed, setting down her wine glass. The secret is that the right kind of attention gets better with age, while the wrong kind fades away. It's actually a blessing. Trevor had been flirting with both of us throughout the evening. A handsome executive about 45, clearly accustomed to female attention. What fascinated me was watching him gradually shift his focus entirely to Elaine as she spoke about her work and experiences. Her age wasn't a barrier to his attraction, but seemed to enhance it. Women are taught to fear becoming invisible, Elaine told me as we parted. But what really happens is we become visible in more meaningful ways to more meaningful people. Her words crystallized what I'd been discovering. That female attractiveness doesn't diminish with age, but transforms into something potentially more powerful and certainly more authentic. I began embracing this new understanding in everything from how I dressed to how I entered a room. No longer trying to appear younger, I chose clothes that expressed confidence rather than seeking approval. The paradoxical result was more genuine compliments and appreciative glances than I'd received in years of trying to conform to youthful ideals. You can probably recall times when someone's self-assurance made them the most captivating person in the room, regardless of conventional beauty standards. At a friend's retirement party, I wore a bold red dress that would have terrified my younger self. Throughout the evening, I caught admiring glances from men and women alike. Not because the dress made me look younger, but because it declared I was comfortable in my own skin. Daniel approached me near the end of the night, a successful architect whose work I'd long admired. "You move through the world differently than most people," he observed, his interest evident in his sustained eye contact and the way he positioned himself to continue our conversation despite interruptions. His attraction seemed rooted in something more substantial than physical appearance. Walking home that night, I realized I no longer feared being judged and found wanting based on impossible beauty standards. The freedom of this revelation was intoxicating. Not because I'd stopped caring about being attractive, but because I'd discovered that true attractiveness isn't about fighting time, but about embracing what time gives us: authenticity, wisdom, and the courage to be fully ourselves. The most unexpected aspect of this journey was rediscovering playfulness and humor as elements of attraction. As I relaxed into my authentic self, I found myself laughing more easily, making jokes that reflected my unique perspective, creating moments of lightness that drew people toward me. This spontaneity had an almost magnetic effect, particularly on men who seemed weary of calculated interactions. You've probably noticed how a genuine laugh can transform someone's entire appearance, creating an immediate connection that transcends physical attributes. During a dinner with friends, I told a story about a disastrous cooking experiment that had everyone at our table laughing so hard the neighboring tables turned to see what they were missing. The shared laughter created an intimacy that no perfect appearance could have accomplished. Richard had been quietly observing our group from the restaurant bar, his interest increasingly evident as the evening progressed. Eventually, he approached our table with a comment that revealed he'd been listening to our conversation. "I haven't heard laughter that real in ages," he said, his eyes meeting mine with unmistakable appreciation for the joy I'd generated. Later, as he walked me to my car, he confessed that he'd been attracted not by how I looked, but by how I made others feel, the ease and warmth I created around me. This revelation completed my understanding of mature attractiveness, that our capacity to bring light and laughter into the world might be the most compelling quality of all, one that only strengthens as our experiences deepen and our self-consciousness fades. I now understand what no one told me about growing older as a woman, that what we lose in conventional youth, we can gain tenfold in presence, wisdom, and authentic connection. The attractiveness of a mature woman isn't about competing with youth, but about embodying qualities that only time and experience can cultivate: self-knowledge, emotional stability, and the confidence to be unapologetically herself. You deserve to know this truth too, that the story society tells about female aging is not just incomplete, but fundamentally wrong. The evidence surrounds us in the women who grow more magnetic with each passing year, who draw others toward them not despite their age, but because of the depth and authenticity that only age can bring. She lives next door to me, Eleanor, 82 years old and more captivating than most people half her age. Men and women alike seek her company, drawn by her warmth, wisdom, and the magnificent freedom with which she moves through the world. Watching her, I glimpse my own future possibility, not of fading away, but of growing ever more fully into my power and presence. This is the secret I wish every woman knew, that our value doesn't diminish with time, but transforms into something perhaps less flashy, but infinitely more substantial. The crow's feet around our eyes are not flaws, but evidence of laughter. The silver in our hair not something to hide, but a crown earned through living. The most attractive quality of all might simply be the courage to be exactly who we are, shaped and strengthened by every year we've lived. Thank you for joining me on this journey of rediscovery. If this perspective resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need this message. Remember, true beauty doesn't fade. It evolves, deepens, and grows more powerful with every passing year.